Ireland has jokingly become called the land of 1,000 quangos, meaning state agencies. Since the 1920s, it has mushroomed into a toxic snout in throth culture, creating jobs for the sake of jobs, a vast majority of which being completely unnecessary, existing purely from favoritism. To give just an idea of how overgrown this area has become, in 1927 there were fewer than 12. By 1970 there were 80. Come the late noughties, that number had peaked to 445. An estimated number across departments of agriculture, finance, communications and tourism, as well as many others, as of 2024, stands at 374. So why are these quangos detrimental? They disguise actual employment figures and productivity of the country, as a large percent employed are absorbed into them. They have become centres for the political networks and parties of the country, to keep agents and workers at arm's reach, to suit their bidding, and cultivate a culture of favouritism, while being paid handsomely to fill out the seats of quango boardrooms, effectively being sector eyes and ears for political parties, with a finger on the local and regional pulse. The quango culture of semi-state companies and state agencies have their roots in the economic lows of 1980s Ireland, with then Taoiseach Charles Haughey and his then protege Bertie Ahern locked in negotiations with trade unions, and the birth of another brainchild of Haughey's, the social partnership industry. The state of 1980s Ireland was purely the fault of politics, as parties continued to bicker and argue on policies while the nation suffered. The Irish nation found its people and economy facing many grim and challenging situations. Among these were the issues of high unemployment, while those working protested for lower taxes, with many others choosing to emigrate. The national debt doubled, with a third of all tax revenue being used to pay it down. Economically, Ireland had among the lowest GDP in Europe, on top of which the agricultural sector suffered badly. Haughey looked for solutions through negotiations between the state and trade unions, beginning with the lowering of taxes for workers. In 1987, the government launched the Programme for National Recovery, which was to be the first of 6 social partnership deals, with a reduction in tax through increases in pay allowance for over a 3-year period. The unions accepted this voluntary pay restraint, with an agreed annual pay rise over those 3 years to keep in line with tax increases. The remainder of this plan was to sow the seeds for quango policy and culture to come. A heady manifesto with grand plans for other areas within the economy such as education, health, agriculture, and tourism, being among those prioritised for existing semi-state bodies. Trade unions were now players in the game, having a seat at the table of power with government. Unions and their leaders were now a part of coordinating economic and social planning. A central part of this deal at the time, retorted by Haughey, was to be wage moderation in return for consultation. His motives, however, were also political. In one move, with bringing unions onto his, and therefore Fianna Fáil's side, overstepped the political competition of Fine Gael and Labour, especially. This real motivation in Haughey's cunningness set the stage for decades of divided party loyalty and infighting, driving a wedge between union bosses and the Labour Party. A key to Haughey's plans were the party loyalists they had running and monitoring day-to-day operations within the semi-state and union landscape of the country. Among these, of course, was Haughey's then protege Bertie Ahern, who cemented friendships with union bosses and social partners. Ahern, instructed by Haughey as Minister for Labour, was to keep talks open and flowing in matters of industrial relations. There have been a number of agreements since the original 1987 Programme for National Recovery, having been 5 in existence up until the Celtic Tiger economic crash, with all activity ceasing in 2010. What began as a simple agreement to improve the lives and living wages of workers became an entrapment by government of unions, purely in the guise of following policies in exchange for pay conditions. The game was always for government to have the upper hand, while keeping unions on side. The government, namely Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, always trying to position themselves perfectly so as to keep wage levels, as well as various other issues such as welfare, education, health and employment on their terms, all the while having kept union leaders and key figures placated through social partnership consultation, pay packages, and contracts. As time went on and years passed, from its inception, Hawke's social partnership brainchild grew in size and complexity. More and more elaborate bodies and schemes emerged, such as the National Centre for Partnership and Performance, to oversee and maintain what had now become an industry, bringing unions deeper and deeper into the traps of government, being subject to terms and conditions such as the support of EU objectives, third world charity schemes, and social justice awareness campaigns. As of 2021, more than 10 years since the last vestiges of social partnership activity, with government looking to revive the relationship, only now having Ireland be a different landscape of cemented Quangos, NGOs and unions with very blurred lines of purpose, activity and engagement, having fallen under the umbrella of liberal dogma, of diversity, equity and inclusion, being less about wages, and more being a vehicle for the liberal agenda and social justice activities, keeping the heavily tax-funded NGO and semi-state apparatus alive.